Hello learners and welcome back to my channel Let's Learn Together. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the first chapter of class 10th English textbook, which is Feet Without Footprint, and the title of the chapter is The Triumph of Surgery. Now this chapter is I found this chapter extremely interesting because by giving a very simple storyline, this chapter gives a very great message. So this chapter in today's video, what I'm going to do is that I'm trying to give you first of all the story of the chapter, and then I would very slightly and briefly discuss with you the themes of the chapters, and you have to think about the themes of the chapters or of the story further by reading the chapter. Please understand that watching a video or listening to the summary of the story is not something which is going to substitute the reading of the chapter. So you have to read the chapter on your own, and you have to read it between the lines, and you need to understand that the issues that are brought about by me in this particular video, you please try to think more about it and extend that idea into your own words, and try to extend uh, and try to take the themes or the thematic aspects into more deeper form. So that will happen only when you would have read the chapter between the lines. Okay, so this particular story is about a dog, and the name of the dog is Tricky. So Tricky's mistress is Mrs. Pumphrey. Now, of lately, Tricky is feeling very diseased and very uneasy. He is not enjoying good health. He has become extremely plump. He has become fat. He has stopped living a normal kind of life. So he is extremely non-active, passive, and he eats a lot of food. Now his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey, who is a very rich woman and very indulgent one, and she loves Tricky a lot. She decides to see a veterinary surgeon who is an acquaintance of her. So, this veterinary surgeon is also the narrator of the story. This is the surgeon's story, and the surgeon is approached by Mrs. Pumphrey, who talked about the declining health of Tricky. And the surgeon recommends from Mrs. He recommends that Mrs. Pomfrey should stop giving the kind of food that she has been offering to the dog. She has been offering a very high caloric food without any exercise that the dog goes through actually. So he keeps on eating a lot of food, a lot of sweeteners, a lot of food which is too high in cholesterol and calorie, but he does not take up any kind of exercises, and this has actually turned him into a very plump, slow, diseased, inactive, and a passive dog. So he's not able to be active and be as happy as other dogs or animals of his age are. So then a veterinary surgeon, or the narrator, who's actually the narrator, he asked Mrs. Pumphrey to stop giving him food for some while, for some duration of time, so that Tricky has some time to recover. But Mrs. Pumphrey feels that Tricky needs some kind of medicinal or some kind of medical treatment. So and she keeps on giving excuses for giving him a lot of food and not giving him a lot of exercises. So what happens at that stage? The narrator decides that he's going to take Tricky with his at his home, because Mrs. Pumphrey, being an extremely loving mistress, she loves Tricky so much that it is not possible for Mrs. Pumphrey to invest into a disciplined and a healthy lifestyle. So he decides to take Tricky to his home, because that if Tricky continues to indulge in the same kind of eating habit and of the lifestyle, then he would never be able to recover from his declining health. He takes Ricky to his home, and he stops giving him food for 2 days. He doesn't offer him any food for 2 days. He only offer him water to drink. And then slowly and steadily on the third day, Tricky starts recovering. He starts being active, he starts playing up, and he starts moving around with the dogs, pet dogs of the veterinary surgeon. And the dogs also, accepts him very gladly, and he becomes the member of the gang, and they spend the whole day playing around, running around, and being extremely physically active. And this begins with the improving health of Tricky. And Tricky starts feeling extremely glad. And slowly and steadily, he also picks up back his eating habits, but this time he eats healthy food and not just the kind of food that was being offered by his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey. So when Mrs. Pumphrey at the same time was extremely, worried about Tricky, because she has probably not lived away from Tricky for such a long time. It's almost been a fortnight, and she keeps ringing to Mr. Harriet. Mr. Harriet is the narrator who also happens to be the veterinary surgeon. Mr. Harriet, and he asks whether Tricky is fine, and he says that Tricky is doing very well. So she keeps on sending dozens of eggs for Tricky in the morning, and along with that, she also sent wine and brandy to Tricky. And the kind of number of eggs that are being sent out by Mrs. Pumphrey for Tricky is not just eaten by him, but they're also enjoyed by narrator and by other dogs of narrator also. So narrator by this time was extremely happy to have Tricky at his home, because of Tricky he was getting so much to eat and to indulge into. And it was not just benefiting Tricky, it was benefiting his other dogs also. So, slowly and steadily, as I told you, Tricky regains his health, and after regaining his health, Mrs. Pumphrey one day comes to pick him up, and she just takes her dog back. This is a very simple story, as I told you. That's all the story is about. But then it also gives you a very important message. And I found the story especially interesting at this time, because this could be the scenario of most of us at this time. With this kind of situation around all of us, we all most of the time are forced to stay back in our homes, which are also restricting our physical activities only to the boundaries of our home. So we might, as well have this indulgence or this desire to get into eating habits, because most of us now have a lots of time without having to go out, without having to actually to busy ourselves in any kind of outdoor activities. We might just feel like, experimenting in kitchen and honing our culinary skills, and to make new things every day, and to treat ourselves with variety of food items at this time, without actually thinking that we are probably not exercising that much, and we might, this might just affect our health negatively. That is why I found the story quite interesting, because there's a stark similarity of the times around us right now, and whatever the circumstances that have been depicted in the story. So, what you need to understand, but anyway, you're not supposed to write this in your answer copies, but then you must understand the overindulgent nature of Mrs. Pumphrey. Mrs. Pumphrey being an extremely pampering mistress, and an extremely a nice person, I would say. In fact, overtly nice. So much shows that it is impossible for her to understand that the kind of treatment that she gives for her dog is extremely doing a lot of wrong things in his life, and he is suffering badly due to it. So it also tells you, the story tells you the need of discipline and the need of restrictions in our life. A life with discipline and restrictions is the only life which is extremely required in the life of in the life of human beings, or in the life of animals. If Tricky would have been a dog of any other household, he would have been dealt with a kind of a normal and a regular behavior. But being a pet of a person like Mrs. Pumphrey, who is just too pampering, as I told you, uh, he is just always, all the time, overwhelmed with the love in the form of food, that actually ends up destroying his health and declining his health. So therefore, the chapter very in a very funny way, in a very entertaining way, and at the same time in a very light-hearted way, gives you the lesson on the importance of discipline, and then the importance of eating habits, and the importance of right lifestyle in our lives. It's also a satire. I would say it's a subtle satire on the lifestyle of rich people. Mrs. Pumphrey is an extremely rich woman, and at least in the story, we do not get to see if she has any other family members apart from maids and other sets of servants. She probably doesn't have any other family members because they have not been depicted, or they have not been mentioned in the story. So I have a reason to believe probably she is a single person who is living all alone, along with her dog. So she just pours all her love on the dog, and that is what I say, that this is a satire, because she has no shortage of money. She doesn't have any shortage of luxury. She doesn't have any shortage of resources, and therefore you find tricky in this particular story having a different wardrobe altogether. So there's a different wardrobe which has a clothes of summers, which has clothes of winters, and then it also have a different set of clothes for rainy season. And at the same time, he has two types of beds. One is something which is known as day bed, and another kind of a bed is a night bed. Then he has his favorite toys and cushions, and he has a variety of things uh, which I don't think a dog requires. In fact, I don't think even a human being requires. So having things which are much more than what one require could actually turn against that person. Okay, so it's a satire definitely of a vain, of a prideful, and of a very useless lifestyle that rich people generally lead, and this may get very easily reflected um, uh, in their declining health and in their vain nature. At the same time, we also know that there are lots and lots of people in this world, or in the society, or in the community we live nearby, who might just be in need of very basic things like food and clothes and a roof over their head. And at the same time, we also have people like Mrs. Pumphrey, who are just too vain with their wealth and their riches and their resources that they just end up destroying their own lives. So anything which is much more than what one's require can actually end up turning against that person, or can become a reason for that person's destruction, if I can use that word. And at the same time, such people should become more responsible. Rich people, or those who have lots of wealth with them, or those who are just blessed with lots of riches with them, should actually turn their attention towards that section of the society which need help, rather than just overflowing their love on their dogs in the form of extreme food, and then in the form of extreme sweets. So this is what I at least found out, that the theme of the story is. It's a very light-hearted story. At the same time, it's a very sharp satire on the vain lifestyles of the rich people. Uh, a kind of thoughtless life that they live, without giving any thought to their actions when they live. So in that way, I found the story very interesting. Now, having listened to the story, just read it too in your textbook, and at the same try to do two or three things that you have to do after reading this story. First thing is that try to draw a character sketch of the only two characters that we have in this particular story. One is Mr. Harriet, who is the narrator, also supposed to be the veterinary surgeon, and also of Mrs. Humphrey, who is the mistress of the dog Tricky, right? So try to make out a character sketch of these two characters, and along with that, write down the thematic aspects of the story also. And not just write down, but think about what is it that the the story is actually hinting at, or what could be the message of the story. So I am leaving you with that. I hope you read the story, and I also hope that you enjoy the story. Along with that, give it a thought, that which is extremely important, that why is it that the story is written, and what could actually be the aim of writing the story. So till then, thank you so much, and have a wonderful day ahead.